Ambassador Lee Hanna stared out the viewport of the human shuttle. Terra's hope as they approached the massive structure ahead. Nexus. Prime stretched across space like a metal city, its countless docking bays glowing with the lights of ships. From across the galaxy, the station was so large that Earth's moon could fit inside its central hub. "Would you look at that?" whispered Communications Officer Choi Damon from the pilot's seat. "I've seen the pictures, but this is something else entirely." Hannah smoothed down her navy blue diplomatic uniform, checking her appearance one last time. In the reflection of the viewport, the weight of humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Council pressed on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Behind her, Colonel Park Jin-soo sat rigid in his seat, his military bearing evident even in the civilian clothes he'd been ordered to wear for the summit. "Jin-soo, you're making me nervous," Hannah said, turning to face her military advisor. "Try to relax. We're here to make friends, not fight wars." Park's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't trust any of them. 50 years ago, we didn't even know aliens existed. Now we're supposed to sit at their table and pretend we belong." Dr. Kim Mingi looked up from her tablet, where she'd been studying alien biology reports. "That's exactly why we belong here, Colonel. We bring a fresh perspective. Look at this data. Most of these species have been stagnant for centuries. They need new ideas." The shuttle shuddered slightly as they entered the station's gravitational field. Through the speakers, Damon's voice crackled with static. "Beginning. Final approach. Everyone strap in." Hannah watched the docking bay grow larger as they descended. Dozens of alien vessels filled the massive space-league silver ships that looked like liquid metal. Angular black craft covered in strange symbols, and one massive vessel that seemed to be grown rather than built, its organic curves pulsing. With bioluminescent patterns, the Villani war cruiser, Minji said, pointing to a ship that resembled a giant metal cat. "Their species evolved from pack hunters on a world with 3 suns. Are supposed to be incredibly efficient warriors." "Great," Park muttered. "Warrior cats from hell." A mechanical voice echoed through their shuttle's communication system. "Human vessel Terra's Hope, you are cleared for docking bay 77 Alpha. Please follow automated guidance systems. Welcome to Nexus Prime." As they touched down, Hannah felt the artificial gravity of the station take hold. The sensation was strange, lighter than Earth's gravity, but heavier than the ship's artificial field. Through the viewport, she could see other passengers disembarking from nearby vessels. A group of tall, blue-skinned beings with elongated heads walked past, their movements graceful and flowing. Behind them came something that looked like a walking tree, its bark-like skin covered in glowing moss. Most amazing of all were the creatures that seemed to be made of pure energy, floating through the air like living lightning. "My God," Hannah breathed. "We're really doing this." The shuttle's doors hissed open, and immediately the sounds of Nexus Prime flooded in. Strange music drifted through the air, mixed with the hum of alien conversations in languages that hurt to listen to. The smell was indescribable, a mixture of ozone, exotic spices, and something that reminded Hannah of her grandmother's garden after rain. A mechanical figure approached their shuttle. It stood 3 meters tall, its body composed of interlocking silver plates that shifted and adjusted as it moved. 2 glowing blue eyes served as its face, and when it spoke, its voice was perfectly clear but completely emotionless. "Greetings, human delegation. I am Designation 47, your assigned guide and translator. Please follow me to your quarters." They grabbed their bags and followed the robot through the docking bay. Hannah tried not to stare at the alien ships around them, but it was impossible. One vessel appeared to be made entirely of crystal, its faceted surface reflecting the bay's lights in rainbow patterns. Another ship seemed to be alive, its hull breathing slowly like a sleeping animal. Zorak preferred their ships to be extensions of their collective consciousness, Designation 47 explained, noticing her fascination. "The bioship belongs to the Organi Collective. They grow their technology rather than manufacture it." They entered a corridor that stretched further than Hannah could see. The walls were lined with viewports showing the infinite expanse of space, and the ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. Hundreds of different species moved through the passage, none of them paying any attention to the human delegation. "Are we that unimportant?" Park asked quietly. "Not unimportant, Designation 47, replied, unknown. "Many species here have been part of the Galactic Council for thousands of years. Humanity achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. You are considered ... young." They passed a group of floating jellyfish-like creatures that glowed with soft purple light. One of them drifted close to Minji, and she gasped in wonder as it pulsed with different colors. "They're trying to communicate," she said excitedly. "This is incredible. Their entire body is a language system. Please do not interact with the ethereal collective without proper translation protocols," Designation 47 warned. "Misunderstandings can be ... uncomfortable." As they walked, Hannah noticed other delegations observing them from a distance. A group of cat-like beings with golden fur whispered among themselves, their pointed ears twitching. Several crystalline creatures stood perfectly still, but their bodies resonated with low musical notes that somehow felt disapproving. "They don't seem particularly welcoming," Hannah observed. "The Galactic Council extended your invitation reluctantly," Designation 47 said with typical mechanical honesty. "Many species question whether humanity is ready for galactic diplomacy. Your species has a reputation for ... aggression." Park's hand instinctively moved toward his hip, where his sidearm would normally rest. The gesture wasn't lost on several nearby aliens, who quickly moved away from the human group. "We're not here to fight," Hannah said firmly. "We want peace." "That remains to be seen," Designation 47 replied. "Your quarters are ahead. The summit begins tomorrow at 0800 Standard Time. Please review the cultural protocols in your welcome packet. Violations of diplomatic etiquette can result in immediate expulsion from the station." They arrived at a section of the station marked with human-readable signs, a small courtesy that Hannah appreciated. Their quarters were surprisingly comfortable, with furniture that had been adjusted for human proportions and a viewport that offered a stunning view of the galaxy. "Get some rest," Hannah told her team. "Tomorrow we make history." As the others settled in, Hannah stood at the viewport, watching the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue world that had sent its children to the stars. In less than 24 hours, humanity would take its place among the galactic community. She had no idea that by this time tomorrow, that same galactic community would be planning how to avoid making humans angry. The Grand Assembly Hall stretched before them like a cathedral made of stars and metal. Ambassador Lee Hannah had never seen anything so magnificent in her life. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters above, displaying a real-time view of the galaxy that slowly rotated as they watched. Different sections of the massive chamber had been designed for various alien species, some areas filled with thick, purple gas for methane breathers, others containing pools of liquid for aquatic delegates. In zero-gravity zones, where energy beings could float freely. "Stay close," Hannah whispered to her team as they entered. "And remember what we practiced." The ceremony was already beginning. A holographic display showed the emblems of over 300 different species, each one representing a world that had achieved space flight before humans had even invented the wheel. The weight of that history pressed down on Hannah's shoulders as she took her designated seat in the newcomer section. Designation 47 stood beside their table, his mechanical voice barely audible above the strange music that filled the hall. "Ceremony will begin with traditional greetings between delegates. Please observe proper protocols." Hannah watched as different species approached each other with elaborate rituals. The Villani delegates touched their foreheads together while purring softly. The crystalline Zorak beings created beautiful harmonic resonances that made the air shimmer. The ethereal collective simply flowed around each other like colorful smoke. "When do we do our part?" Dr. Kim Minji asked, adjusting her formal uniform. Designation 47 replied. "You will be introduced to Chancellor Zilmuth of the Zorak Collective. He is considered one of the most respected diplomats in the galaxy." Hannah felt her heart racing. This was humanity's first official diplomatic contact with an alien leader. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times during the journey to Nexus Prime. The Chancellor approached their section, and Hannah stood to greet him. Zilmoth was beautiful in an alien way. His body was composed of what looked like living crystal, with geometric patterns that shifted and changed as he moved. His face was angular and sharp, with eyes that glowed like blue stars.
Chancellor?
Zilmouth, Hannah said, stepping forward with her most diplomatic smile. It's an honor to meet you. She extended her hand in the traditional human greeting, just as she had been taught. Back on Earth, a firm handshake showed confidence and respect. She grasped what appeared to be the Chancellor's primary appendage, a crystalline extension that looked like an arm, made of diamonds. The sound that followed would haunt her dreams for years. Asterisk. Crack asterisk. The Chancellor's arm shattered like glass hitting concrete. Fragments of crystal scattered across the floor, each piece singing a different note as it fell. Zilmoth's scream wasn't like any sound Hannah had ever heard. It was a harmony of pain that seemed to come from everywhere at once. A musical cry that made her bones ache. Oh my God. Hannah gasped, staring in horror at the broken pieces of the Chancellor's arm. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Other Zorak delegates rushed forward, their crystalline bodies resonating with alarm calls. The fallen fragments began to glow brighter, and Hannah realized with growing terror that each piece was still part of the Chancellor's consciousness. Medical assistance required immediately. One of the Zorak delegates sang in perfect harmony. Structural damage to primary appendage. Consciousness fragmentation detected. A Villani mediator approached to help, but Hannah turned to face him directly, her eyes wide with concern and apology. Please, can you help him? I didn't know. The feline-like alien took one look at her direct gaze and dropped to the floor in a submissive crouch, his golden fur standing on end. His pupils dilated to pinpricks, and a low whimpering sound escaped his throat. Why is he doing that? Oriel Park asked, moving protectively toward Hannah. Predator response, Dr. Kim said. Quietly, her scientific mind working even in the chaos. Direct eye contact must be a dominant signal in their culture. The Villani mediator was now flat on his stomach, his tail tucked between his legs, making soft mewing sounds of submission. Other delegates began backing away from the human group, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of alarm. Throughout the hall, perhaps we should move to the dining area, designation 47 suggested, his mechanical voice somehow managing to convey urgency. The welcome banquet is beginning. The dining hall was another marvel of engineering. With tables that could adjust their atmospheric composition and gravity fields for different species, Hannah found herself seated at a mixed table with delegates from 5 different worlds, all of them eyeing the humans with obvious wariness. Let's try to salvage this, Hannah whispered to her team. Just be friendly and normal. Dr. Kim nodded and turned to the alien sitting beside her, a tall, blue-skinned being with elongated limbs and large dark eyes. I'm Dr. Kim Mingi from Earth. I study alien biology. Your species is fascinating. The blue alien, who wore a translator device around his neck, replied in a melodic voice. I am Science Keeper Veltar of the Azurian Collective. We have heard little of your world. Oh, Earth has such a rich history, Minji said enthusiastically, relaxing for the first time since the ceremony disaster. We've survived several ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, and 2 major world wars just in recent millennia. The conversation at nearby tables suddenly stopped. Prime Seeker Yultara, a Villani delegate with silver fur and intelligent golden eyes, paused a mid-bite of her nutrition cube. Survived ... ice ages. Oh yes, Colonel Park added cheerfully, cutting into what appeared to be actual cooked meat on his plate. The last one nearly wiped us out about 12,000 years ago, but we adapted. Humans are quite resilient. A floating, ethereal delegate named Consciousness that drifts began pulsing alarmed colors, bright reds and oranges that hurt to look at directly. Your species ... consumes organic matter? Park looked up from his meal, genuinely confused by the question. Of course, plants, animals, fungi, we're omnivores. Yeah. This protein came from a kawa, large herbivore we domesticated for food production. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background music seemed to stop. You, domesticated other living beings? Science Keeper Veltar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sure, Dr. Kim said, nodding enthusiastically. Cows, pigs, chickens, sheep. We've been farming for about 10,000 years. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago actually helped mammalian evolution, including our ancestors. We learned to survive in underground shelters during the impact winter. Consciousness that drifts was now pulsing so rapidly that it looked like a disco ball of terror. You survived, killing impacts. Well, our ancestors did, Kim continued, oblivious to the growing horror around the table. That's how evolution works. The weak die out, the strong survive. Earth is pretty harsh, so we had to get tough or go extinct. Prime Seeker Yulterra's nutrition cube fell from her trembling paws. Your world, tries to kill you. Constantly, Park said with a laugh, thinking he was being funny. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, blizzards. We get hit by space rocks pretty regularly too. Nothing like the big one that got the dinosaurs, but still dangerous. Several delegates quietly activated their personal communicators. Hannah noticed the activity but assumed they were just taking notes for their reports. The wars you mentioned, Science Keeper Veltar asked carefully, were they serious conflicts? World wars, Kim confirmed. The second one killed about 70 million people. We dropped atomic bombs on our own cities. But that taught us about nuclear physics, which helped us develop space travel. The table fell completely silent. Even the mechanical servers seemed to pause in their duties. You, weaponize atomic energy. Consciousness that drifts pulsed in colors that didn't seem to exist in normal space. Sure, Park said, taking another bite of his meal. We've got enough nuclear weapons to destroy Earth several times over. Just in case. Prime Seeker Yulterra made a sound that might have been whimpering. Just in case. You never know. Park shrugged. Better to be prepared. Around them, delegates were now openly staring at the human table. Some were backing away. Others were speaking rapidly into their communicators. The festive atmosphere of the welcome banquet had transformed into something that felt more like a wake. Is everything okay? Hannah asked, finally noticing the change in mood. Did we say something wrong? The only response was the sound of chairs scraping across the floor as delegates found excuses to move to other tables. The morning of the second day brought an eerie change to Nexus Prime. Ambassador Lee Hannah noticed it immediately as she walked. Through the corridors, aliens who had ignored them yesterday now stopped and stared. Some pointed at the human delegation with various appendages. Others quickly moved to the opposite side of the hallway. And a few actually turned around and went back the way they came. Something's different, Colonel Park muttered, his military instincts on high alert. They're watching us. Dr. Kim Mingi pulled out her tablet, checking the overnight reports. The station's communication networks were very active last night. Lots of encrypted transmissions to home worlds. Probably just reporting on the summit, Hannah said, though she felt uneasy. Let's focus on today's session. The Grand Assembly Hall was packed when they arrived. Every seat was filled, and delegates who hadn't bothered to attend the first day were now present. The energy in the room felt different, tense, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Designation 47 escorted them to their seats, his mechanical movements somehow seeming more cautious than before. Today's session will focus on territorial mining. Rights in the Outer Rim sectors, he announced. Ambassador Hannah, you will present humanity's position first. Hannah stood and walked to the central podium, her footsteps echoing in the unusually quiet hall. As she approached the microphone, she noticed that several delegates in the front rows actually leaned back in their seats. Thank you, honorable delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We appreciate the Council's concerns about territorial mining rights in the disputed sectors. Her straightforward, confident tone made several Villani delegates visibly flinch. Their ears flattened against their heads, and one began making soft, whimpering sounds. On Earth, we've dealt with resource scarcity for millennia, Hannah continued. not noticing the growing tension. We've learned to adapt to extreme conditions and make the most of limited resources. Zoric delegate's crystalline body began resonating with low, anxious harmonics. The sound spread through the other crystal. Beings like a contagion of fear. Perhaps Dr. Kim could share some information about our home planet's environment, Hannah said, gesturing to her colleague. It might help explain our perspective on resource management. Dr. Kim stood and activated her holographic display. Three-dimensional. The image of Earth appeared above the podium, slowly rotating to show its blue oceans and white clouds. It looked peaceful and beautiful, nothing like what was about to be described. Earth's surface temperature varies from -89 degrees Celsius to +70 degrees Celsius. Kim began cheerfully, as if discussing a pleasant vacation spot. We have atmospheric storms with winds exceeding 400 kilometers per hour. Gao! Azorian delegate Science Keeper Veltar leaned forward in his seat. Excuse me, did you say 400 kilometers per hour? Oh yes, Kim nodded enthusiastically. Our hurricanes and tornadoes can reach speeds of over 500 kilometers per hour. They can destroy entire cities in minutes. A group of small, insect-like delegates began clicking their mandibles rapidly, their species equivalent of panicked chatter. Our oceans contain pressurized depths that would crush most vessels, Kim continued, manipulating the hologram to show Earth's deep ocean trenches. The pressure at our deepest point is over 1,000 times greater than at sea level. The Villani delegate, Prime Seeker Yultera, whispered urgently to her aide. They live in crushing depths. Some of our people work and explore in these conditions, Kim said proudly. We've built submarines that can withstand the pressure. Humans are naturally curious about extreme environments. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Even the mechanical servers had stopped their usual bustling activity. Our gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, Kim continued, completely oblivious to the growing horror around her. We also have areas of intense radiation, toxic atmospheric conditions, and regions where the ground itself is molten rock. Consciousness that drifts. The ethereal delegate began pulsing colors that hurt to look at directly. Your people, ... live near molten rock. Of course, Kim laughed. We have active volcanoes, geysers, and hot springs. Some of our cities are built right next to volcanic areas. The soil is very fertile there. Colonel Park, who had been quietly taking notes, reached for his water glass. The simple motion caused half the delegates in the front row to tense up. As he lifted the glass, his elbow bumped the edge of the podium. The crystal glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Damn, Park muttered, bending down to pick up the pieces. Sorry about that. As he gathered the broken glass, one sharp edge sliced across his palm. The cut was small but deep enough to draw blood. Dark red droplets began seeping from the wound. Falling to the white floor of the assembly hall, the reaction was immediate and terrifying. The ethereal delegate's consciousness form flickered like a dying light bulb, its colors shifting to patterns that seemed to scream without making sound. Several Zorak representatives' crystalline bodies began resonating fear harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. The Villani delegates actually leaped from their seats and ran toward the exits, their feline forms moving with desperate speed. Emergency. One of the insect-like delegates clicked frantically. Structural breach detected. Containment failure. Park looked up from the broken glass, still holding his bleeding hand. It's just a small cut, no big deal. The words "no big deal" seemed to echo through the chamber like a death sentence. A small alien that looked like a walking mushroom fainted and toppled over. Several energy beings fled through the nearest ventilation system. You contain pressurized liquid, stammered Chancellor Zilmuth, his newly repaired arm vibrating with terror. The replacement crystal was paler than the rest of his body, and it was singing a continuous note of fear. Blood, Dr. Kim explained helpfully, as if discussing the weather. It carries oxygen and nutrients throughout our bodies. We have about 5 liters of it circulating under pressure. The assembly hall erupted in panic. Delegates began fleeing in every direction. Villani were running on all fours, their diplomatic dignity forgotten in their terror. The Zorak were resonating such intense fear harmonics that the station's hull began to vibrate. The ethereal beings were disappearing into the ventilation systems like colorful smoke. "We also have redundant organs," Kim continued, raising her voice to be heard over the chaos. "To kidneys, to lungs, backup systems in case of damage. Very efficient design." A group of mechanical delegates began broadcasting emergency signals. Their optical sensors were flashing red, and their bodies were producing sounds that could only be described as robotic screaming. "Wait, where is everyone going?" Hannah asked, looking around the rapidly emptying hall. "Are we taking a break?" "Colonel?" Park wrapped his bleeding hand in a napkin, the red stain spreading through the white cloth. "Maybe they're not used to seeing injuries. The human delegation will please remain seated," Designation 47 announced, his mechanical voice somehow managing to convey barely controlled panic. "Emergency protocols are being activated." Through the chamber's massive windows, they could see alien ships in the docking bays beginning to power up their engines. Some were already leaving, their hulls glowing with the energy of desperate escape. "Did we say something wrong?" Dr. Kim asked, genuinely confused as she watched a group of floating jellyfish-like beings phase through the walls rather than use the doors. On the main display screen, emergency broadcasts were beginning to appear in dozens of alien languages. The universal translator was struggling to keep up, but fragments of meaning came through. ... Death world species confirmed. ... Pressurized containment breach. ... Extreme survival adaptation. ... Recommend. ... Recommend immediate defensive posture. Ambassador Hannah stood in the center of the chaos, watching the greatest diplomatic gathering in galactic history dissolve into mass panic. She had no idea that humanity's honest description of their home world had just redefined them in the eyes of the galaxy. They were no longer seen as primitive newcomers. They were now classified as the most dangerous species anyone had ever encountered. And they had absolutely no idea why. Across the galaxy, emergency communication networks lit up like a spider web of panic. On the Villani home world of Cathri, General Dexandra stood before the High Command's holographic display, her golden fur standing on end as she delivered her report. "The situation is worse than we initially thought," she began, her voice tight. "With controlled fear, the humans didn't just survive on their death world, they thrived on it." The assembled military leaders, each one a veteran of countless battles, listened in stunned silence as recordings from the Peace Summit played on the main screen. They watched Colonel Park casually describe nuclear weapons. Dr. Kim cheerfully explained surviving asteroid impacts, and Ambassador Hannah's bone-crushing handshake that had shattered the Zorak Chancellor's arm. "They evolved from predators," General Alexandra continued, highlighting close-up images of human faces. "Look at their eyes. They face forward for depth perception during hunting. Their teeth are designed for tearing flesh. They consume other living beings for sustenance." Defense Minister Kailara, an elderly Villani with silver fur, leaned forward in her chair. "How is this possible? Most intelligent species evolve from herbivores or filter feeders. Predators are usually too aggressive to develop advanced civilizations. That's what makes them so dangerous," Intelligence Officer Morthok added from his position at the tactical display. "They somehow manage to maintain their predatory instincts while developing technology. They treat planetary catastrophes as minor inconveniences, asteroid impacts, ice ages, global warfare. They speak of these as learning experiences." The recording shifted to show Dr. Kim's presentation about Earth's environment. The assembled military leaders watched in horror as she described temperatures that would kill most species, atmospheric storms that could destroy cities, and ocean depths that would crush their most advanced submarines. They live in conditions that would be considered a military weapon against most species. On the massive display, Colonel Park's bleeding hand filled the screen. The assembled Villani military leaders instinctively stepped back, their primal instincts, recognizing the sight of pressurized blood as a sign of an apex predator. 5 liters of pressurized liquid, Morthok continued, his voice shaking, circulating through their bodies at all times. They have backup organs in case of damage. Meanwhile, in the crystal cities of the Zorak homeworld, the collective's analysis was even more disturbing. The crystalline beings had connected their consciousness to review every second of the human delegation's presentation. What they found shook them to their core. They weaponized atomic energy, reported Analysis Node Prime, its harmonic voice resonating through the crystal spires. They used it against their own species. They created weapons capable of destroying their entire planet multiple times over, yet they still exist. The Zora Collective's understanding was different from other species. As beings of living crystal, they could perceive patterns and connections that others missed. They had analyzed human history, human psychology, and human potential. The pattern is clear, continued Analysis No Prime. They are not just survivors, they are apex survivors. Every challenge that would destroy other species only makes them stronger. They have turned survival into an art form. The revelation sent harmonic shockwaves through the crystal cities. For the first time in their 1,000-year history, the Zorak Collective felt fear. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Lee Hanna was completely unaware of the galactic panic she had unleashed. She sat in her quarters reviewing the day's negotiations with growing confusion. "I don't understand what's happening," she said to her team. "Yesterday they were treating us like unwanted guests. Today they're practically throwing trade agreements at us." Colonel Park looked up from his medical scanner, checking the healing progress of his cut hand. "Maybe they're just being polite? First contact protocols and all that?" Dr. Kim was studying her tablet, which showed incoming communication. Requests from dozens of species. "I'm getting research collaboration offers from universities across the galaxy. They want to study our extreme adaptation methodologies." "That's wonderful," Hannah said, though she still felt something was off. "I just hope we're not missing some cultural nuance." The next morning brought another negotiation session, but the atmosphere was completely different. Delegates who had been demanding territorial concessions for centuries were now speaking in whispers. Their various forms of body language all conveying the same message: submission. Prime Seeker Yultara approached the human delegation with visible caution, her movements careful and deliberate. "Ambassador Hanna, we have reconsidered our position on the mining rights dispute." "Oh," Hanna replied, genuinely interested. "What are your new thoughts?" We believe that humans, with your expertise in survival and resource management, would be better suited to oversee the disputed operations," Yultara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Hanna blinked in surprise. "That's very generous of you, but we're newcomers to galactic politics. Surely more experienced civilizations would be better suited for such responsibility." "No," several delegates shouted simultaneously, their various forms of panic clearly visible. A Zoric delegate's crystalline body began resonating with fear harmonics. An ethereal being pulsed colors that seemed to scream, "Please don't make us do it." The sudden outburst caused Hannah to step back in surprise. "Did I say something wrong?" No, Yultara quickly assured her. "We simply believe that your species' unique ... perspective would bring valuable insights to the operation." Colonel Park leaned over to Dr. Kim. "You seem unusually eager to make deals. Are we missing something?" "I don't know," Kim whispered back. "But I keep getting messages from xenobiologists asking for tissue samples and genetic analysis. They seem particularly interested in our predatory adaptations. What the human delegation didn't know was that across the galaxy, defensive fleets were being quietly repositioned, not to attack the human homeworld, but to establish what military commanders were calling a respectful perimeter around the Sol system. The Volani Third Fleet, commanded by Admiral Kexthera, had been ordered to take position at the edge of human space. As her ships moved into formation, she couldn't help but stare at the tactical display showing Earth's location. "It's hard to believe," she said to her second-in-command, "that small blue world produced the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "The intelligence reports are clear," her tactical officer replied. "They survived an extinctional-level asteroid impact, multiple ice ages, and global warfare. They've turned their entire planet into a training ground for surviving impossible conditions." On the bridge of the Zoric vessel Harmonic Resonance, Captain Crystal's song of warning was receiving similar orders, Maintain defensive posture. Do not approach the Sol system without explicit permission from local authorities. Understood, Command, the captain replied, his crystalline form singing with nervous energy. But what if they decide to expand their territory? Then we get out of their way, came the reply from Zorak High Command. Analysis indicates that resistance would be futile. They have survived everything their own death world could throw at them. What could we possibly do that would be worse? Even the mechanical species, who usually remained neutral in galactic politics, had issued new protocols. Designation 47 received updated instructions through the station's communication network. Human delegation is to be granted full diplomatic immunity. Comply with all requests immediately. Do not provoke. The robot's optical sensors processed the information with mechanical precision. For the first time in his existence, Designation 47 understood why organic species experienced fear. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, long-range sensors detected something that made military commanders across the galaxy even more nervous. Human ships were beginning to explore beyond their home system, their designs crude but effective. They were expanding. There was nothing anyone could do to stop them. The galaxy had found its new apex predators. They were coming whether anyone wanted them to or not. The final day of the summit dawned with an atmosphere Ambassador Lee Hanna had never experienced before. As she walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, alien delegates actually stepped aside to let her pass. Some bowed their heads, others made gestures that seemed respectful but desperate, and a few simply fled in the opposite direction. "This is weird," Colonel Park muttered, adjusting his formal uniform. "Yesterday, they were terrified of us. Today they're treating us like royalty." Dr. Kim Minji was busy reviewing the stack of documents that had been delivered to their quarters overnight. "Look at this," she said, holding up a datapad. "Trade agreements, resource-sharing contracts, technology exchange proposals. There's enough here to keep Earth busy for the next century. And we haven't even asked for most of this stuff," Hannah said, shaking her head in amazement. "I don't understand what changed." The Grand Assembly Hall was packed when they arrived, but the energy was completely different from the previous days. Instead of the confident chatter of galactic diplomats, there was an almost reverent silence. Delegates sat rigidly in their seats, their various forms of body language all conveying the same message. "Please don't hurt us." Designation -47 approached their table with what seemed like extra caution. "Ambassador Hanna, the Council has prepared the final agreements for your approval." The mechanical being's optical sensors were dimmer than usual, and his movements seemed more hesitant. Even the robots were acting strange. "Excellent," Hanna said. "Accepting the documents, I'm looking forward to reviewing the terms." As she began reading, her eyes widened in disbelief. Every territorial dispute that had been deadlocked for centuries was being resolved in humanity's favor. The mining rights in the Outer Rim sectors granted to Earth, the trade routes through the galactic Corapand to human ships. Resource extraction rights in 12 different star systems, all theirs. "This can't be right," she whispered to her team. "They're giving us everything we want and more." "Maybe they're just being generous," Park suggested. Though he looked as confused as she felt, the formal session began with Prime Seeker Yultera approaching the podium. Her golden fur was flat against her body, and she moved with the careful precision of someone walking through a minefield. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying through the hall's translation systems. "After careful consideration, the Galactic Council has reached unanimous decisions on all outstanding issues." She gestured to the holographic display, which showed a map of the galaxy with various territories highlighted in blue, the color designated for human space. "Humanity will be granted full mining rights in the disputed Outer Rim sectors," Yultara announced. "Additionally, Earth will receive exclusive access to the Kepler Trade Corridor and full extraction rights in the Vega Resource Zone." The assembled delegates nodded frantically, as if their lives depended on agreeing with every word. "Furthermore," Yultara continued, "humanity will be granted seats on 12 different galactic councils, including the High Council of Interstellar Commerce and the Strategic Defense Committee." Hannah stood up, feeling like she needed to object. This is incredibly generous, but surely we should start with smaller responsibilities. No. Several delegates shouted simultaneously, their panic clearly visible. Zoric delegates crystalline. Body began resonating with fear harmonics. We mean Yultara quickly corrected. We believe humanity's unique perspective would be invaluable in these positions. Chancellor Zilmoth, his replaced arm still pale compared to the rest of his crystalline form, stepped forward. We would also like to appoint humanity as peacekeeping coordinators for 3 entire star systems. Peacekeeping coordinators? Hannah repeated, completely bewildered. But we've never done anything like that before? Your species has extensive experience with conflict resolution, Zilmoth replied, his harmonic voice trembling slightly. Your history of surviving global warfare makes you uniquely qualified. The way he said surviving global warfare made it sound like humanity had accomplished something miraculous, rather than horrifying. Dr. Kim leaned over to Park. Are they talking about the same species that dropped nuclear bombs on itself? I think that's exactly what they're talking about, Park whispered back, and for some reason, they think that's impressive. The signing ceremony was unlike anything in galactic history. Documents that usually took decades to negotiate were signed in minutes. Trade agreements that should have required years of careful consideration were approved immediately. Humanity was essentially being handed keys to the galaxy. As ambassador, Hannah signed the final document. She felt a mix of pride and confusion. Thank you all for such a warm welcome, she said to the assembled delegates. We look forward to peaceful cooperation with all member species. The delegates nodded so frantically that several of them looked like they might injure themselves. Their eagerness to agree was almost frightening. If you ever need anything, Chancellor Zilmoth offered, his crystalline form still trembling, please don't hesitate to contact us. It would be ... honored ... to assist. The word honored came out sounding more like terrified, but Hannah attributed it to translation issues. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Dr. Kim approached. Consciousness that drifts, the ethereal representative. I hope we can arrange scientific exchanges. I'd love to learn about your homeworld. The energy being's form flickered with barely contained terror. Perhaps remote communication would be sufficient, it replied, its colors shifting. 2 patterns that seemed to scream, please don't come to our world. Remote communication it is, Kim said cheerfully, completely missing the alien's obvious panic. The shuttle journey back to Earth was filled with celebration. Colonel Park raised a glass of synthesized alcohol, grinning widely. To successful diplomacy. I can't believe how well that went, Hannah laughed, reviewing the signed agreements. You were practically giving us everything we asked for. Humanity's first galactic diplomatic mission, Dr. Kim added, taking a sip of her drink. We should be proud. Behind them, Nexus Prime grew smaller in the viewport. What they couldn't see were the emergency broadcasts being transmitted across the galaxy, even as they departed. On the bridge of the Villani command ship, Golden Hunter, Admiral Kexthera received the official notification, attention, all vessels. The Sol system is now designated as a protected zone. Approach only with explicit permission from local authorities. Protected zone? Her communications officer asked. Since when do we protect other species from us? Since we discovered what they're capable of, the Admiral replied grimly. Update all navigation computers. Human space is now off limits without direct authorization from High Command. Similar messages were being sent throughout the galaxy. The Zorak Collective's official bulletin was even more explicit. New standing orders. Humans are to be considered the galaxy's unofficial peacekeeping force. Do not provoke. Do not engage in hostile actions. Comply immediately with all human requests. The mechanical species update was characteristically direct. Classification update. Species designation human. Threat level. Extinction class predator. Status. Diplomatically friendly but extremely dangerous. The Galactic Council's final memo was brief but absolute. Humanity has been granted full membership and peacekeeping authority. This decision is final and non-negotiable. On Earth News. Reports celebrated humanity's greatest diplomatic triumph. The headlines read, Humanity welcomed into galactic community, an unprecedented success at First Interstellar Summit. Ambassador Hannah gave interviews describing the warm welcome they had received and the generous terms of the agreements. She spoke of humanity's bright future among the stars and the friendships they had formed with alien species. None of the human delegation ever learned that their success came not from their diplomatic skills, but from the galaxy's collective terror of a species that had not only survived on a death world, but had thrived there and turned survival into an art form. In the years that followed, humanity became the galaxy's most effective peacekeepers. When territorial disputes arose, both sides would immediately request human mediation. When trade negotiations stalled, human representatives were called in to facilitate agreements. When conflicts threatened to escalate into war, the mere mention of human involvement was enough to bring all parties to the negotiating table, not because humans were particularly skilled at conflict resolution, but because no species wanted to risk finding out what the friendly Deathworld predators might do if truly angered. The galaxy had found its peace, born not from understanding, but from the most basic survival instinct of all, fear and humanity. Blissfully unaware of their terrifying reputation, continued to approach every galactic crisis with the same cheerful optimism that had accidentally conquered the galaxy in the first place. The END